we are going to show them up on our screen in real time. So again, please go over to menti.com, use the code 7781846 and answer what you think the right, or answer the questions in the way that you think they're right. So for those of you, menti.com, go over to menti.com and use the code 77. Now the chat is in my way of being able to see this, Hamdi. 7781846. So we'll just give it one more minute while people are answering. Kristen, do you see that the questions are getting answered over there on the Menti site? Great. So one more minute for those of you who just joined, go to menti.com, it's in the chat, and enter code 7781846, and you will share the answers in real time in just 1 minute. Okay. While we are going over there, I will introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Nicole Mercier. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor and the head of the Office of Technology Management. Our office is the office that works with faculty members to protect intellectual property and partner that IP so that it gets developed into real products that can benefit society. We're going to talk a lot more about that, but before we do that, let's see the results, Kristen. Great. So the question is, how many startups have spun out of WashU research labs? We have over 70 companies. So for those of you who answered that correctly, congratulations. We actually reached 80 this last year. And I want to quickly make a distinction here. When we talk about something being a WashU company, we in WashU actually think of two types of companies. We think of WashU startups that were founded with university intellectual property that the university owns. Typically, these come out of faculty research labs. We see these as distinct from WashU DNA companies, which might be a undergraduate or a grad student who has their own intellectual property that's not owned by the universities. Both of these types of companies have value in our ecosystem. My office works with the researchers to protect university intellectual property. So when we talk about WashU companies today, we are really going to talk about those founded by faculty and staff that have created IP that the university owns. Thanks, Kristen. So the next question is, did you know that WashU has a team in Cortex? Oh, lots of people knew that. Yes, we are located on the first floor of the 4240 building. You may have walked by our office and seen a WashU startup wall. And all of those companies are the WashU IP companies that have spun out of this university. Some of them are no longer active, but they're still up there. Most of them are active, however. And a good number of them are here in the St. Louis region. So let's go to the next question, which is, which of these baby items was invented by WashU innovators? Oh, okay, so lots of people have seen our video and you know that the swaddle blanket is a WashU invention. So we have a WashU faculty member who's no longer here who invented that blanket that keeps us all sane at night when our children don't wake up from the startle motion. So thank you. Next one. Which medical test was developed by WashU innovators? It was the test for heart attack. I think a lot of people don't realize when a loved one walks into the emergency room, they are getting treated with WashU from WashU Research, and it's so critical. So this is a huge one for us that we're very proud to talk that has come out of our research. So thank you, Kristen. We are here today to talk about, oh, thank you. And so this is great. This is a picture of our wall. So if you walk into 4240, you can see the different startup companies that have come out, and you know, ask us questions. There's a lot of companies on that wall. Let us know what your questions are. Come in and have a conversation with us. So thanks for putting that up, Kristen. I think today we're here to talk about being in St. Louis and for St. Louis. And I'm excited to have 3 different panelists who engage in Washington University startups and or 3 different companies. These companies we're going to present today are Acera Surgical, Origent Biosciences, and STL. And each of them are going to share their story about in St. Louis for St. Louis. But I think it's really important for people to understand that this commitment started a while ago. For over a decade, we have been working as a university on putting more startups out into the region that are based on WashU intellectual property. And the reason is twofold. One, these companies bring a lot of money into the region. They get grants from the government, they get investor grants, and they put a lot of jobs out. So having deep tech companies that come out of the university is really a wonderful thing for the region. And we are very committed to that. In 2019, our chancellor said, we are in St. Louis for St. Louis. And Washington University intellectual property startup companies are a huge basis for that. And so I'm happy to have the companies here today that are going to be speaking to us. So Matt McEwen is from Acera Surgical. He is the founder and chief scientific officer. Shekhar Sadasivam and Scott Crick are both from Origent. Shekhar is the chief executive officer, and Scott Crick is the director of research and application. And Jonathan Silva is joining us. Silva, that was my Massachusetts accent that came out. Sorry about that. Jonathan Silva from SENTIAR is the co-founder and chief technology officer. And I'm excited that they're here to share all of their stories with you. We're going to start with Matt. I'll let Matt do more of an introduction about himself, and you'll hear about Acera. And then I will call on you, Shekhar and Scott, and then John. So thank you. Matt, are you on mute by any chance?
There we go. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thanks so much, Nicole, for having me here today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and tell our story at Acera Surgical. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Matthew McEwen. I'm the founder and chief science officer at Acera Surgical. Essentially, I'm a former MD PhD student here at WashU, and my story is during my time at the university, I was working in the biomedical engineering lab here at WashU and got very interested in how nanoscale materials could be used to improve the design of new tissue scaffolds and regenerative medical devices. And while I was a student, we got very interested into essentially the ways in which nanoscale materials could be utilized to control cell growth and improve tissue regeneration. And so while I was in the lab, we found this unique class of materials called nanofibers that actually emulated the structure and architecture of native extracellular matrix. And we found that cells really love to grab onto these fibers, grow into these nanofiber materials, and set up new tissue. And we eventually found during our time at the university that these materials had a very interesting application that they could be used to repair damaged tissues, regenerate new tissues, and eventually be used to treat a number of different chronic wounds and soft tissue injuries. And so again, as a medical student, decided that we really needed to bring this technology out into the clinical space and eventually set up a company that would eventually become Acera. Initially, it was just 4 of us working on this technology. Went out, met a number of folks in the St. Louis ecosystem, got a number of pieces of help from the Scandalaris Center, and eventually sort of took this technology from this concept in the lab through to our first FDA product in 2016. But I want to talk a little bit today about the technology and what we're doing, and specifically how we're impacting the St. Louis area. So in terms of the technology, what we're doing at Acera is making the first class of nanofabricated surgical materials and medical materials. Specifically, we're using this nanofiber technology to design synthetic hybrid scale matrices that can help promote tissue regeneration. Kristen, if you'd like to play the video, I'll show you a little bit about what makes our technology tick. Essentially, what we make are these flexible, compliant materials that are made up of nanoscale fibers. And the unique thing about these nanoscale fibers is they really emulate the same structure and architecture as native extracellular matrix. So these are all synthetic materials. They're all engineered rather than harvested from an animal or a human. Every sheet of this material is made up of multiple layers of these nanoscale fibers. And these fibers are unique in that they really mimic the same structure and architecture of native tissue. So what we do with this material is we put it into a wound, we put it into a surgical defect, and what happens is these nanoscale fibers or hybrid scale fibers actually serve as a scaffold for cells to grow into, as you can see in the video here. Cells will actually follow these fibers, very interestingly, almost like cars on a highway. They'll follow them wherever they go. And it actually provides the structure for your body to start to heal and form new tissues and eventually replace these defects with newly formed tissue. What's also interesting is our materials are completely resorbable. So once you place them in the body, they're resorbed over time, leaving only that newly regenerated or healed tissue behind. It's also very easy for surgeons and clinicians to cut, to shape to the wound or to the defect size. And also it's strong enough and compliant enough so that clinicians and surgeons can suture it in place or even tape into the wound. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're doing. Now, what's exciting, if you want to go to the next slide here, is that we've taken this technology that we developed again at WashU and now have developed it into 3 FDA approved products. The first product, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail, is our Restrata wound matrix. This is the first nanofiber material for treating a variety of different types of wounds. And I'll show you some of the results we're seeing with Restrata even here in the St. Louis region. We also took the technology and utilized it to develop a product called Cerafix, which is the first nanofiber material for use in neurosurgical procedures. And then also we just recently got approval for a product called Covora, which is the first nanofiber material for use in treating burns. So we've taken this technology now and have a number of products that are on the market and being used across the country and internationally. If you want to go to the next slide, just to talk specifically about the Restrata product, Restrata has really become sort of our leading product in our portfolio. This is a very unique product. It's the first of its kind, and being a resorbable synthetic engineered material for treating chronic wounds. It's used in a number of different applications, treating a number of different types of wounds. And we've seen some really great success with this product even here at in the St. Louis area. So with that, we can go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about how this product is making a difference here in St. Louis. So first of all, we're utilizing our products now at a number of places around the city. We're utilizing it at Barnes Jewish Hospital, St. Louis University, the St. Louis VA, and in general, we're really dedicated to utilizing this product to improving wound care and advanced care for St. Louisans and also St. Louis veterans as well. So we're seeing some great results actually utilizing this product to help heal and treat a number of folks right here at home, and that's very important to us. Also, another reason that we're here in St. Louis, and one of the reasons that we've really kept and based our company here in St. Louis, is for these leading medical institutions, WashU, St. Louis University, the VA system. Again, there's a number of great institutions here in St. Louis that are all, that we're working with and working with to treat St. Louisans here locally. If you want to go to the next slide. Another reason that we've really, based our company in St. Louis, and one of the real things that has helped us sort of develop Acera over the years, is really a strong pool of biomedical talent here. There's a great undercurrent of folks coming out of WashU and St. Louis University, a number of various systems that are very talented, have a lot of great experience in the biomedical space, and we've hired a number of them into Acera to help us develop our team. So there's a great pool of talent here that really, I think, supports startups and companies like ours. If you want to go to the next slide here, another reason that I think we've grown up in St. Louis and have stayed in St. Louis is the unique entrepreneurial ecosystem that exists here in the city. I think there's, over the last few years, it's really grown tremendously, and there's a number of great entrepreneurial programs and systems and opportunities that really helped us get started and have helped others as well. We went through originally the what used to be called the Olin Cup at the Scandalaris Center, and that was really what started the spark that became Acera. And so there's some great resources out there, and there's a great entrepreneurial ecosystem here in the city. If we'll go to the next slide, the other main reason I think that we have stayed in St. Louis and that others are attracted to St. Louis is because, again, all the investment dollars that we raise as a company and that others raise really go a lot farther here in town. The costs are lower. Generally the salaries are lower, and you can get a lot more for your money and get farther with those investment dollars that you bring in. And so I think it's a big attractor and for a lot of folks here in town. So with that, hopefully it's going to give you a little sense of Acera and how we've grown up out of WashU and some of the great reasons that we're excited to be in St. Louis and for St. Louis.
Thank you, Matt. That's an exciting story, and I'm looking forward to talking more about it in the Q&A. I did say and if you saw it, put your questions in the chat box, because we will have a Q&A with all three companies after they finish, and we'll take questions out of there. So we're going to move on to Origin Biosciences with Shaker and Scott.
Thank you, Nicole, and good morning to everybody on the call, and thank you for joining. And wanted to talk about Origin Bioscience, a very young startup, really just a year and a half old. And our mission is to transform biodetection, really providing trusted high performance. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the technology that we licensed from Professor Singamaneni's lab, who's in the Material Science and Mechanical Engineering Department at WashU. And essentially what it is a fluorescence reporter molecule that's used in a lot of, reporter molecules. Fluorescence reporter molecules are used in a lot of immunoassays and many different applications, bioanalytical applications. And one of the limiting factors of these fluors is the brightness and the photostability. And what Shrikant has been able to accomplish with this invention is a fluor that's about 5,000 times brighter than what you can get with organic fluors that are available in the market, and significantly more photostable. So what this means in terms of practical applications is you can detect extremely low concentrations of biomarkers in biological fluids. So anything from blood to urine to cerebral spinal fluid. And really with something so bright, you wouldn't have to go get a cerebral spinal tap, for example, for understanding how your biomarkers are with neurological diseases, and you can potentially do it in blood. And the two paths that we're pursuing is, one is a life science research path, and another is point of care diagnostics. Our initial focus is the life science research market, primarily because it's a faster go-to-market strategy. And then the second would be point of care. And with life science research, we're developing, in addition to the floors, it's technology is one piece of it. And the other piece of it is the everything that goes together with it. So it's in addition to the plasmonic floor, we also have a reader. We'll also have some other complementary products that go together with it. So we provide a total solution, whether it's to a life science researcher or for point of care diagnostics. And in life science research, two typical applications would be pharma research, where we would focus on developing drugs with higher efficacy and lower toxicity at a lower cost. And that's what we hope to enable. And for academic research, it's really increased throughput, higher quality research with less spend. And all this is enabled with this plasmonic floors that are super bright, but also with additional capability in terms of being able to measure multiple biomarkers simultaneously with a really small amount of biological fluid sample size. And in terms of point of care diagnostics, two examples would be rapid detection of sepsis, where you have to detect potential indications within the first 30 to 45 minutes of a patient arriving. And it's causes 1 in 3 hospital deaths in the US. And the problem here has been the ability to detect extremely low concentrations in a simple point of care test like what you do for a pregnancy test. And we have established, or we have demonstrated capability to be able to do this at high levels of sensitivity. And now is to really take a very deliberate path to bringing this to market, of course, going through all the FDA approvals and all of that. And another typical application would be early diagnosis of myocardial infarction, which is a typical heart attack, and potentially somebody, an emergency vehicle picking up a patient at home would be able to diagnose whether it's a real heart attack or something related to indigestion or some other form. So before they get to the emergency room, there's a diagnosis, and the emergency room is better prepped to deal with the patient. So with that background, I'll go into how the WashU and the St. Louis ecosystem has helped us really move quickly in the last year and a half. So first of all, 6 of the 7 of our startup team are all WashU grads, starting with Scott, who was our employee number 1. Extremely fortunate to have found him, and has been key in terms of both the science, but also in terms of technology licensing, and in terms of ability to think from a business perspective. And then the founding team is also from WashU. That's, if you looked at the slide on the right-hand side, that's Shrikant is the first picture, and then there is Evan Karash, who's now a professor at Duke, and then Jerry Morrissey. And proximity to Shrikant's lab here, who's our chief scientific officer, has been extremely critical to our success. One, in just transferring the technology from his lab to our facility here at CIC, but also in terms of how, as we have scaled it up, if you have run into any issues, we have a technical expert that we can always go to. And he's continuing to develop applications with plasmonic floors. And we get front row seat to collaborating with him in terms of applying plasmonic floors and also collaborating with WashU professors, both in the med school and in the engineering school. And the talent that we get from WashU, in addition to Scott, the second photo on the left is Jingyi Luan, who's the primary inventor of the technology that we licensed. And so we were lucky to get Jingyi on board. And then Claire Kircher joined us from Mizzou. She helped us with a lot of the development of the scale-up of the plasmonic flow process. Chi Sheng also came from Shrikant's lab, and he's been the key for the scale-up of the process from a manufacturing perspective. Josh Peck, a former WashU grad, excellent with mechanical engineering design and actually fabrication. He's helped us shorten the cycle time for development of the reader. So pretty much we do an iteration of the design in the morning. He goes to Made St. Louis, so it's another great facility to have close by. He will make up a new design and bring it the next day. So pretty much we have a day turnaround for every cycle of product improvement that we make, which wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have all these facilities in the St. Louis ecosystem. And then finally, Artem Melnikov did his doctoral work here in biophysics at WashU, did a postdoc at Caltech, and then came back, and we were lucky to get him on board here. So if we go to the next slide, so the first is the product is key, second is having the team, and the third is having a facility that can allow us to grow as we expand. So we started off with just a single bench at the CIC at CET incubator space in a shared lab. And now we have grown up to 6 benches. And we hope to grow to pretty much having our own little private lab at CIC here shortly. And this wouldn't have been possible. There are startups here at CIC with funding coming out of California. And, to Matt's point earlier on, startup costs are significantly lower. And so it facilitates us to be able to grow this business much faster than if we were somewhere else. And we have also obtained seed funding from a St. Louis-based Missouri investor. And we have been successful primarily due to the efforts of Scott, but also Scott in close collaboration with Shrikant in attracting close to about maybe $2.5–3 million worth of NIH SBIR funding. So we could go to the next slide, Kristen. And a lot of our initial collaboration partners are from WashU. So I'll just talk quickly through the bullet points on the right-hand side, and I'll have Scott explain more in detail on some of the collaborations that we're doing. I actually spent 25 years in the semiconductor industry, and the solar industry. So moving to biotech was a big jump for me, but I wouldn't have done it if not for earlier associations with Cultivation Capital, which does a lot of seed investment in the area, and also working with their general partners. And then working with local friends and family who helped me make connections. So that's how I met Shrikant, and then met Scott, both extremely good finds. So having that ecosystem vibrant here in St. Louis was extremely helpful. And a lot of the initial collaborations here are
Yeah, thanks, Shekhar. Like Matt said, I'm also a WashU grad and have been associated with WashU in some form or fashion for 20 years now. It's a great place to develop biotechnology because there's so many opportunities, so much knowledge, and so many. Actually, there's a real sense of community where folks that I collaborate with that are looking at alternative technologies are like, if for nothing else, it's born and raised here. So that's it's WashU. It's WashU. It's part of the family. So let's work on that. So initial collaboration partners at WashU, Shekhar's already mentioned Shrikant and Jerry. They're moving more in the development new application spaces and the plasmonic floors. I'm working with Abe Kavi, who I met through OTM, actually, and have maintained a friendship. He's an MD PhD in pathology. I'm working with Diane Binder in the CHIPS facility, that's in the immunomonitoring lab, and I'm working with Chris Farnsworth, who's the director of point of care testing at Barnes and a professor in pathology. And with these, we're exploring different applications of the plasmonic floors. I should also mention working with Pratik Sinha in anesthesiology to develop a rapid sepsis diagnostic prognostic test based on some biomarker work that he did in UC San Francisco. Shrikant and Jerry are sort of off and running on their own stuff, and so a lot of the collaborations we have going on now are directly with Origin and the collaborators at the medical school. And I'd say we have some, I don't want to go into too much detail about what we're working on, but I think it's really enabled us to do some fantastic, proof of principle experiments on real life, clinically relevant, biologically relevant systems. And again, I just want to point out that we have a ton of talent here, and we also have a ton of expertise. And it's been really easy to tap into that. Like I said, there's this sense of community here that folks will go out of their way to help. So that's been actually key for us. And hopefully we have some publications coming out soon that were driven from those collaborations. And so with that, I'll hand it over.
Great. And then the last slide. So essentially we plan to stay and grow in St. Louis. We expect to have 2 more WashU grads join us early 2021. And we're looking forward to hiring more undergrads and grads this summer as we continue to grow. And WashU in St. Louis, as Matt mentioned, offers really high quality biotech ecosystem. And CIC-CET has definitely the space for us to grow over at least the next couple of years. And in summary, St. Louis and WashU have been a great combination, in terms of talent, facilities, local partners for us to start and grow. What our goal is to really create a world-class life science research and diagnostic company. And we really have no intention of exiting quickly. We really intend to grow a long-term company that will stay in St. Louis for the long term. So with that.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll look forward to having some Q&A in just a couple of minutes, but I will say it's exciting to see that you're working on taking WashU's initial discovery around the test for heart attack and making that even quicker. So that's exciting. Kristen, can you pull up SENTIAR slides? And John, can you unmute?
Yes.
Because we all forget that. And
right.
You can have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm here representing SENTIAR, and we can go to the next slide. So what SENTIAR is working on is a headset that allows physicians to take 2D representations that they're using in the operating room and see those representations in 3 dimensions. So to make those the geometries that they're trying to understand about the patient's anatomy and show them in 3D and in real time. So we connect to existing mapping systems. We take the 3D information, but instead of displaying it for the physician on a 2D monitor, we give them a hologram that they can look around and they can see from different angles what's going on. They can see where their tools are placed in that anatomy. And our first application is cardiac electrophysiology. And that's when physicians use catheters and they insert them in the heart and they target tissue that's creating an arrhythmia and they destroy it by applying radio frequency energy. And so knowing where that catheter is and its position relative to the electrical activity of the heart is critical for improving those procedures. So we just got a 510K approval for using this headset and connecting it to the mapping system. And we're working probably in the next year to start rolling that out into different operating rooms. But the big picture is that we think that we can do better in terms of providing physicians a better way to look at their data and a better way to control their data. So as we were putting this together, we realized that one thing that physicians really like doing is moving their own model back and forth. So I think one way to think about it right now is Kristen's moving my slides. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking to have someone else control your what's being shown. So can we go back to the previous slide? And I think that was a perfect example. So this is what goes on in the operating room, where a technician is typically moving the display that the physician's trying to use, and they're moving the different angles, and the physician says, no, go right, no, go back. And that communication mix-up can really slow down the procedure and cause a lot of frustration. So
Can I just say that was terrifying? That was not planned, and that was terrifying.
Yeah. So that was a perfect example of what's going on in the operating room. Is they're trying to do a surgery and someone moves their model, and so what the physicians really like doing is having their own control. And right now that's gaze-based, so they move their head, and they can use different controls to move the model left, right, to zoom in, to get a better look. They can even move their head around the corner. So kind of our future roadmap is to really start connecting all the different systems in the cath lab in a way that the physician who's performing the surgery can control them. So that there's not these kind of communication things that really can be problematic. So the way this got started was actually it was at WashU. So my wife is a pediatric cardiac electrophysiologist. And I was invited to Microsoft to see some new technology that they were coming out with. So this was in 2015. And they were talking about how one day 5G wireless networks would be here and quantum computers. And 5G networks are here. Quantum computers still have a little way to go. And they also showed this headset where you could take a 3-dimensional image and place it in your environment. So you can look through the headset, you can see the room that you're sitting in, and at the same time, you can see that hologram. So I called Jen and I said, hey, you know what? They were showing this heart and it was really kind of an artist's rendition. What if we put a real heart in there and you could use this during your procedures? And I had no idea that I was kind of starting a little snowball there. And she went right away and started writing funding for this. And so one of the first resources that we got was from the Department of Pediatrics and from the Children's Discovery Institute. And we started kind of building a prototype over, beginning of 2016. And then we entered the LEAP competition. It was Bear Cup then. And that really helped us develop our business proposition. We got additional grants in the university, and then we spun it out to be its own company. And we got an SBIR grant in collaboration with WashU, and we have several more grants pending. And the relationship with WashU and going back and forth in terms of technology transfer has been very productive for our company. So I think that's all I'll say about what we're doing. We were interviewed on BBC recently, and they put together a really nice video if you're interested in kind of how this thing works a little bit more. And so I pasted the link in the chat there. So we can go to the next slide now. So when we were thinking about different reasons, kind of benefits to St. Louis and benefits to SENTIAR, I think one of the great benefits is that we have access to a world-class medical facility here where we can really bring these new technologies to patients. So we were able to do that initial clinical study and allow physicians to use the headset during a procedure, which really helped us to understand how to improve the technology, how to make it functional for the physicians, and to see the benefits. And it's also beneficial for the patients because they're really getting access to cutting edge solutions. So this is a picture of one of the first patients that we used the headset during their procedure. And that's Jen standing next to him. So we can go to the next slide. Another benefit to St. Louis, I think, is that and I think the other startups have said this as well, is that we're headquartered in St. Louis. And so our office is actually in the Chase Park Plaza Hotel. And it's kind of in a side office there. And we have 7 employees now, and those are really good, high-paying jobs that we've brought to the city. And before COVID, it was really quite a nice place to work, right next to the park, and an excellent hotel with gym facilities. And I don't think we really would have gotten that kind of startup space for the cost in another city like Boston or San Francisco. Next slide. We're also part of the ecosystem, and I think this is a point that others have brought up as well, is if you have a lot of startups, then the infrastructure that supports those startups starts to grow, and really the expertise starts to be here. So a lot of our legal, regulatory, creative, and accounting support has come from local companies. And I think that back and forth, where there's more and more startups using these services, then those services start to be developed in a way that's really easy for us to tap into. And there's also been really good support from the Arch Grants team. And we were supported initially with an Arch grant, and now we've started to give back to that program in terms of reviewing proposals and participating in the selection process. And we've also contributed in terms of sharing our expertise and our experience with getting SBIR grants with grant review panels that have been put on by BioGenerator. Next slide. So we've certainly benefited from really exceptional VC support in St. Louis. That was initially led by Cultivation Capital during our seed round, and BioGenerator came in as well. And they took positions on the board and really provided excellent advice as we progressed. Most recently, we raised an A round, which is hopefully closing in the next couple of weeks, and that was led by V Capital, and that's an investor from Chicago. Now, I think that, and both BioGenerator and Cultivation Capital also participated in that A round, along with St. Louis-based angel investors. I think one big advantage is that these early investors, if the company is successful, the proceeds will stay in St. Louis, and a lot of those investors will reinvest them in new startups. So I think it has the potential to be a productive cycle with different startups exiting and becoming successful. I think more and more venture capital will be available for those efforts. Next slide. And finally, we've been able to reach out to a lot of different community groups. And so we present our HoloLens system at different schools and kind of show students what they can do if they want to grow up and be biomedical engineers. We did a presentation at AIM High St. Louis, and it really wasn't hard to recruit SENTIAR employees to come and do that. They were really excited to go and show kids what's possible if they pursue degrees that allow them to implement these technologies. So that was something we did with AIM High before COVID, and we're looking forward to going back and doing that in future years. So with that, I think we can probably do questions. But overall, what I'd say is St. Louis has been a fantastic home for our startup, and we are looking forward to giving back to that community.
Thank you, John. Thanks for sharing. There are a couple of questions in the chat read, but if anyone has some questions, bring them right into the chat. You can send them directly to me like some others have, or you can just share it openly with everyone and I'll read through them. The first question is for Acera and Origent. The question being, what are key technical challenges that remain for full scaling? And what is the eventual commercial business model? Make it in-house or buy? So let's see, John, can you start with that? So key technologies that remain for scaling.
Oh, yeah. So I think from our end, we've partnered with mapping companies to connect to their technology, and they move slowly. So in startup land, we move just about as fast as possible, and we're constantly pushing those along, the technology along. I think recently we've really established some strong partnerships with some of the market leaders in terms of mapping technology, and that was a real effort. So now that they are working on giving us the access that we need to their data, I think that's probably the primary thing that needs to still get accomplished. So the agreements are there, but just kind of working on a big company scale is our biggest barrier right now to really getting this out to as many labs as possible. And so I think that there's kind of a mismatch there. Like big companies have their own priorities and their own way of doing things. And I think that's been really challenging to align with our funding and how fast we really want to, or the pace we want to take to get this out there.
Thank you. Origin team, do you want to talk about your key technical challenges that remain?
Sure. So the first thing that we had to face was just scaling up the plasmonic flow process. And we had to go from essentially like a 3 milliliter scale to a 500 milliliter to a liter scale. And that we've accomplished. The second, now we're working on automating the entire process so it can be done with minimal amount of human intervention, but also with high quality and reliability. The other pieces of our product in terms of the reader itself, a lot of the initial trouble we had was with finding partners to actually fabricate things and give it to us on short cycle time. And we had to go through a few partners before we were able to, one, we got Josh in-house, but we were also able to find good online sources that can give you a quick turnaround, actually within 3 days on a new product cycle. And that's allowed us to accelerate a lot of the development. So the challenges that remain for us is really completing the development of the reader, which we have all the resources for, and taking all that learning and applying it for a diagnostic tool. And since we have done the more difficult reader now, I think we expect the diagnostic tool development to be done with a lot shorter cycle time, but having the facilities like MAID here in St. Louis has helped us quickly go through it. And in terms of the business model, your question, for the life science research market, really what we're targeting is researchers typically have to go to a core facility because the tools cost like $100,000, and then they have to buy supplies worth $25,000 to $50,000 every year. And our goal is to go to market with a tool that's about $10,000 to $15,000, so about a tenth of the cost, but essentially enable individual academic researchers to not have to go to a core facility, but actually put it in their lab. So they can do work a lot faster and a lot cheaper. And so there are 300,000 researchers in the US. Every one of them can have access to one tool, if not multiple tools. And same way with diagnostics too, is our goal is to come up with the cheapest tool with the highest capabilities. So essentially, what you can get with the central lab, like LabQuest or Quest Diagnostics, our goal is to be able to get it at the physician's office. And so I think the technical challenges we face, we feel we have learned enough in the first year and a half, and the resources within the company and found partners externally to be able to meet those challenges.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's nice to know that you feel comfortable with the resources you have, especially during COVID, because I think that's a concern for some startups. Matt, so similar question, you're scaling in a different way. You are, you have your products, they're on the market. I think the question is, what do you need to do for scaling? But also another sort of similar question is, how do you actually get those products into these hospitals? And can you share the challenges there?
Sure. That's a great question, Nicole. So as you mentioned, we have a number of products that are already FDA approved and on the market, here in the U.S. and in some international markets. And generally, our biggest challenge right now is just how do we get these products in the hands of clinicians and surgeons who can use them to improve their patient care. And what we've found is that there's a number of challenges along those lines, especially in the current kind of COVID environment. First off, many of the hospital systems right now are really trying to cut costs any way they can, in order to, mitigate some of the impacts of COVID. And part of that is a lot of hospitals aren't letting a lot of products in. But additionally, these hospitals are looking for products that can potentially, save them money while also improving patient care. And that's where I think our products have really provided a great option. And so in general, the process looks like this. We need to go and sort of find the clinicians who are excited about the product, but simultaneously go to the hospitals and show them that, look, our product can actually save money and improve patient care. And luckily we've been successful in that, both in the VA system and in the commercial system. But the biggest thing right now is really access. And so we're really trying to, find every way we can to get that message out to the hospitals and to the clinicians, and just bring the product into as many places as we can. One other thing I'll mention is another interesting challenge that we're facing now and have had some great success in, though, is also on the reimbursement front. Especially in the outpatient setting and other settings, it's really important these days that, one, the products are reimbursed, from CMS, Medicare, other private insurers. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we can get our products covered by Medicare, Medicaid, and under CMS. And that's been a really big key part of getting access into as many different settings as possible. So that's another big key piece that we focused on and has really played a part in getting the product out as widely as possible.
Yeah, and that's a huge challenge. And people should realize that not only is Matt and John, part in the company, but they also have research labs going and studies here at the university. So it's a big balance of time. So another question, and I think this applies to all three of these companies, is your investors. So I know that Origent has mostly local investors right now, but in a forward-looking capacity, SENTIAR, you just said that you investors that came in from Chicago, and I know that Acera has investors that are not necessarily locally based. How do you convince these investors of the importance of staying in St. Louis? A lot of times we hear that the biggest challenge for keeping startups in the region is the whim of the investors and wanting the company to be closer to them. So maybe, Matt, I know you're off mute. Maybe you could comment on that first, and then we'll call on the others.
Sure. So we're really lucky to have, probably, the majority of our investors here in St. Louis. And so it makes it very easy to keep it here. But I think, just as we mentioned earlier, I think there's a number of great reasons to keep the company in St. Louis, including sort of the low costs, associated with being, here in the Midwest as opposed to on a coast. Also, you're just generally closer to both coasts, and it's easier for folks previously in the pre-COVID era to travel around, and that made a big difference as well. But I think also, like you mentioned, just, those types of relationships with the key institutions, with WashU, SLU, the VA here, et cetera. I think just, St. Louis is a great place with a number of great potential partners. And so I think that makes St. Louis a very attractive spot. So overall, I think we've found that, it's easy to convince folks that we should be in St. Louis long-term.
That's great. That's great. John, do you want to comment there?
Yeah, so every time that this has come up, we've kind of showed the investors how much our access to WashU, and especially the medical school, has benefited the company. So the ability to really develop something and pretty quickly, go through the IRB process, make sure it's safe, but to bring the technology to the hospital is much quicker here because of our tight connection with the university. And we also have a lot of resources, both in the labs and also students that have worked in the lab on these projects and then come right over to SENTIAR and bring the ideas that they've developed in the lab and start integrating those into our development pipeline. So I think we've had a lot of, we can point to a lot of concrete things where the company has certainly benefited from being right here. And that's been something that, when people take a second look and they really look at how much the company's benefited, they really don't want to move from St. Louis.
Yeah, it's encouraging that investors are starting to hear that argument, because we appreciate the proximal value to, the local startup companies. Shaker, or Scott, do you want to comment on this in any way?
I think based on my previous experience in the semiconductor industry and also with other companies that I work with, is a lot of times you show the results in terms of what you accomplish in terms of product development, or go to market, or even financially. That puts a lot of the other discussion in terms of where you need to be located to the background. So a lot of it is driven by how well you execute. And for us, the execution starts with the talent. And if you look at the talent that we have, every one of them, whether it's Scott or Artem or Chisheng, these guys bring multiple skills. Like, for example, Scott can go from talking about a biologically complex problem 1 minute to solving something related to optics or mechanics or electrical circuitry design, or going and programming something. So I think when you have the access to the great talent and you deliver results day in and day out, and we have access to WashU Medical School to be able to bring these things to market, like John said, I think a lot of the discussion where we should be located goes to the background, and that's been my experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you all for being here today. I'm mindful of the time, and I'm sure there's another St. Louis Startup Week session happening next. I want to thank St. Louis Startup Week for letting us be a part of it, letting us share the importance of our startups and why they're here in St. Louis and what they are actually doing for the St. Louis region. We are committed to sharing more of this. So John, Shaker, Scott, and Matt, thank you so much for joining us today, and excited